or change. Hello, my name is Trudi Rainsberry and today we're going to be talking about transition and change. This is the fifth in a series of videos aimed at offering practical advice and ideas for supporting children and young people on the autism spectrum, whether you're in the home environment or in an educational setting. So far we've thought about watching for why, writing it down and talking it through in order for us to have that vital proactive approach to supporting our children, which is really vital for transition and change. We've considered how we might build and develop our ability to communicate and connect with our children in order for us to make the implicit explicit. And for some of our children this may be on a very sensory, experiential way, where we think about offering tactile and scented objects of reference that may support them with understanding the meaning of a situation. It could be through social scripts and stories which we've thought about, or even, as last week, thinking about how art and drawing using comic strips and cartoons can also build that understanding of context and meaning. Transitions and change can often be extremely challenging for individuals on the autism spectrum, and it is really beneficial for us to have that proactive approach, anticipating what those changes and transitions might be and considering the impact they may have on our children and young people. And this may be longer term transitions, such as those that we'd think a year or even years in advance, transitioning from early years to primary, primary to secondary, and then from secondary to post or further education. But it can also be those small transitions that we don't necessarily think about, such as moving from the playground into the classroom or from watching television to bedtime. And so it's beneficial for us to consider how we might offer predictability and structure whilst ourselves building our understanding and being flexible ourselves. In order for us to do this, it can be good to think of our planning and preparation. This doesn't have to be cumbersome or challenging. We're often already doing it, but it can benefit from being planned and made explicit, such as through the use of visuals and communicating in a meaningful way with our children, as we've discussed previously. I'm going to start with thinking about those significant transitions, such as returning to school following the COVID pandemic, changing settings, key stages and classes. These transitions benefit greatly from having a joined up approach between the home and educational settings, and this may be through virtual meetings with the SENCO class teacher and parent carer, or it could be through virtual IEP and education and healthcare plan reviews and meetings. And this may have happened in the autumn for some schools and settings. However, it would benefit from being revisited, particularly having that collaboration between the new setting, the current setting, and parents and carers. I can't stress enough the stress and anxiety parents and carers will be going through, and that collaboration and having an opportunity to be heard and feel listened to is hugely beneficial at this time of transition. And also in the educational settings, having those conversations between staff to alleviate their stresses and anxieties at this time. Planning. Planning transitions should include all those involved in supporting the child or young person, and wherever possible include the child or young person themselves. And this is really important for that post-16 transition. Ensuring that the child, young person feels safe and that their views are being heard is really important. Finding out those views, worries and concerns could be done through something like a comic strip conversation, or even through a talking mat, and this simply finds out what the child is happy about, what they are not sure about, and what they really are quite worried about. And it also maybe for some children and young people is actually through observing them, through observing their reactions to change and transition in order for their view to be heard, even though it's not necessarily verbally. The information that we gather from our child or young person can then be used to help plan a pupil profile, passport or pen portrait in order for that information about their concerns and their needs, as well as their strengths and interests, can be shared, such as through this example of a pupil passport here. It's got a photograph, it's got information about them, what they like, what their concerns are and how they can be supported, and the more significant concerns. And planning, gathering information about the environmental factors, such as the sensory and practical issues that might occur within a particular educational setting, the noises and the smells, as well as the transitions between different areas, which may possibly be less stressful at this current time with social distancing. But also we need to gather that information to explain to our children the what, when, why and how, as well as who of the transition. And with the who's going to be there that I know, what staff members, possibly even friends and peers that they may be familiar with through the use of photographs or even videos in some cases. So we've thought about planning, and now we're thinking about preparation. And when we're thinking about preparing our children for significant changes and transitions, we need to think about pre-warning. What is going to be the correct length of time and the frequency in which we do it? So if we think about preparing our children through storyboards, comic strip conversations or a social story, we need to think about how often we're going to share this and how much in advance are we going to start sharing it with them, always monitoring their levels of anxiety and interest to see whether or not we need to increase the frequency or we need to leave it and have it on a weekly basis rather than every single day if it's raising anxiety. So this is the sort of social story that you might expect for a child returning to school following the pandemic. Obviously this is for a child who needs support with their understanding through visuals, through symbols in this case, as well as through words. And the words can be to offer a script to the adult that is maybe talking and signing with the child, and it's explaining to the child what is going to be the same and what is going to be different. So it's a little bit longer than a one-page social story. And with going to secondary school, that could be a booklet, a photo booklet with images of all the different places that they are going to need to know where they go and what it's going to look like, including key members of staff, and possibly if they've got another child that they know that's going, that they are a preferred child, a friend, then they can possibly be included if that child's parents are willing. And thinking about a social story transitioning to a different year group, this would be read in the summer holiday, whatever duration, so maybe a week before starting school, or it could be read every single day during the school holiday if that is what the child needs for reassurance. And you would have a photograph of the child on the top, possibly a friend if that has been allowed, and the teacher and a support staff for that class on the bottom of it if there is one. And so we can do that. We can also do schedules such as countdowns as well, and I found countdowns really helpful, and it builds that independence as well. So this child was very excited about when we were going to go swimming, and they were able to check off each day themselves independently using a whiteboard pen to know when something was going to happen. So it can be for anything that's going to happen to answer that when question. And I used this before I started any of my studies or became a teacher or worked with children on the autism spectrum other than my own. This is one of my children's schedules for the summer holiday, and they would ask when things were going to happen on a very frequent basis, and this was they were independently able to engage with and check off again with a pen so that they knew that that was going to happen. So those are some ideas of the structures that you can put in place. Also, sharing a new timetable with our children and young people is going to be really valuable, whether they're going back after COVID-19 and they're going to have different playtimes and lunchtimes which need to be shared with them and different arrangements. So sending home a visual timetable can be really beneficial. It could be A4 size and laminated so that it's a bit robust, or it could just be an A5 copy for the child to refer to if they're getting anxious about what they're going to do and when, even if it might change after the summer holidays slightly. At least they've got that and you can discuss it, and if they're anxious about something then you can address that and work with the educational setting about it. Maybe for some of our children that rehearsal, role play and going through different scenarios is more beneficial, and it could be driving to the school and looking at the school building with members of staff in that new setting, taking a video log of what it looks like in the lunch hall, in the classrooms, in the PE hall, so that the child or young person has got some way of understanding, as well as having that social story with the photographs in, because they may need to experience it. And for those children and young people who are able to use electronic devices, they might use on their phone an app like Brain in Hand, where you're actually able to go through the daily timetable and also think about different scenarios of what if something goes wrong, such as the bus not turning up. So that can be really helpful too. When considering smaller transitions and those changes that happen throughout the day, we can help by communicating to our child what they're thinking. What am I doing now? What am I doing next? How long for? And when can I do what I want to do? And my first strategy or resource is one that I consider to be a real top tip for quality first teaching, and the use of a visual timetable for the day is really beneficial. And in the classroom, in an early years setting, it may be half of a day, may break it down. In the home environment, it may be from when they get in until bedtime, but these are a really beneficial resource. And please, 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 in a school setting, particularly in a primary and early years setting, use visual timetables, regardless of whether you're a mainstream class and you've got highly able children and they're year 6. Please get them to interact with it, because there will be children in your class who will benefit from this. In secondary settings, it might be different, and then that can be adapted to maybe an individual visual timetable. However, this is hugely beneficial, and what you do is simply you prepare it the day before, or a child in your class prepares it the day before, and after each of the activities they are taken down and that is finished with, and we're going on to next. So now we're doing English, next with playtime, and you take it down. So all of those time, those children and young people who've got real difficulties with executive functioning, not just on the autism spectrum, they can visualize and feel the passage of time. And I'm quite passionate about the use of visual timetables, as you can see. Also, on a one-to-one individual basis, the use of now and next boards could be on a whiteboard, just simply drawn on, or you might want to create your own ones where you customize it so the young person's involved and engaged with it. And this John has chosen the different cartoon characters he wanted on it, and obviously his favourite football team. And so he knows now he's doing writing, next he's going to go on the iPad. And you can extend it to now, next and then. It just is really dependent on the young person. But John was actually a very able year 6 lad, and it was something that he needed to know. Now I'm doing this, next I'm able to do what I want to do, having that element of control. And Jane, thank you so much for this idea. I don't know if Jane was the originator of putting a now and next on a fob, but it's one of the best ideas ever. And with my working now and next boards, I will always put Velcro strips on the back and have the symbols I use most on the back, so I don't have to search for them. So those are little practical tips to be able to help with things like the now and next. And also, obviously, there's the duration of how long you're going to do something. You can use different timers, depending on what you're doing, but also do think some children on the autism spectrum, they might actually find sand timers particularly stressful, and so this is quite a good sensory way of having a timer through having a water orb. Practical activities can really help our children in providing them with a role that they really like to do, to support the transitions that they find challenging, such as if they like shoes, lining the shoes up ready to go on a shopping trip, or in an educational setting, if they find it difficult to come in from outside, asking or getting them to come in to do a particular role before that happens can support them and give them that responsibility and independence. And thinking about the fact that all those little small steps that we do and take for granted can actually be transitions. And so for something like getting clean hands, thinking about the fact that each of these steps of what a child needs to do, turning the tap on, then wetting their hands, getting the soap, washing their hands, those are all transitions that we can make visual, and a child can either engage with removing them or looking at them. And in a classroom environment, thinking about task management boards can be obviously much more simple than this, but this is asking a child to write 5 sentences, and after they've done each step of the way, they tick off what they've done. And it can be done on a pre-typed list if you've got more than one child that's going to be doing this, or it may be shared on a table, or it could be rubbed off when the child has actually achieved that step. So thinking about those really small steps, remembering that not all of our children understand or communicate verbally, and also some children and young people find direct demands and instructions particularly stressful and challenging. We can support this through using transitional objects such as a puppet saying that it's time for bedtime can be more positive than the parent or carer doing it verbally or offering a particular symbol for them. And thinking about something like Pikachu, it's time for the hall or assembly Pikachu, and so that child can take Pikachu and they feel safe and in control of following that transition. And for some of our children, giving objects of reference can be very beneficial to explain it's the end of a lesson and now it's time for playtime. So we've thought about lots of different things regarding transition and change, and it's a big area to cover. I haven't covered shifting attention or thoughts from particular interests, which can be particularly challenging for our children and young people. And so I'm going to cover this next week and think about special interests and attention and focus. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.